I'm going to say something to you now, and you may not like it. I think this job is harder than manual labour. I genuinely think I don't know what I would compare it to. Probably flying an aeroplane without autopilot or being an air traffic controller. I'm being a little bit. No, I do actually believe it. Actually, I'm not being. I'm not just doing this for fun or for provocations. I honestly think that this job is more exhausting. Because manual labour, you can do 8 hours a day. You could not do this for 8 hours a day. Even Steve Allen would struggle to do this for 8 hours a day. And if you want to hear effortless, tune into Steve in the morning. I honestly think that I can prove that this job is more exhausting than manual labour, than your job is, if you're listening to me on a building site now, as long as no one's put a brick through the radio yet. The producers just texted me to say, have you ever done manual labour, James? To which the answer is yes. Shows how much attention you pay to the programme you produce. I spent 2 weeks on a building site in South Yorkshire in 1988. I think there's a blue plaque up on the outdoor toilet that I helped build. It wasn't an outdoor toilet, it's like an extension on it. I think that is an unassailable position. You could not do what I do for 8 hours a day, but you can do manual labour for 8 hours a day. And let's just say that we'd be equally tired at the end of the shift. Now, part of the problem is, of course, that this is now the third hour of the programme, which means that the toxins in my brain are bubbling away, and I'm quite tired, and I've forgotten the question that I was going to ask you as a consequence of this scientific research. If I'd done it in the first hour, you'd be chuckling away, the words would be fizzing out of my mouth, I'd be hitting all of my marks, phones would be ringing off the hook. I've kind of forgotten what the point of this was, except for the very simple comparison. So how do we do this? I think we do it like this. Yeah, chess grandmasters. That's a brilliant example. God, I've got some great prisoners. Chess grandmasters need about 6,000...
I mean, I just can't. I can't do it anymore. Comparing himself to chess grandmaster. That is so humble. I don't think a chess grandmaster can do what he does for 8 hours a day. If you want to know what he does, think of a more unsuccessful Hassan Piker. Except Hassan Piker doesn't have a staff and a team and makes more money. That is the difference, right? So when you look at the struggle, you need to think about Hassan Piker. The struggle is real, yes. Now, what's interesting is that he also plays this
go and have a look at that
as an own. You'll get people who haven't even bothered to watch the clip. They'll just be responding to the headline. James O'Brien, uncanny prediction of how people would react after we put a clip of him claiming to work harder than manual. I'm sorry, but I did watch the clip. But secondly, we are in the age of TikTok. Like, we are in the age of woke corporations, aren't we? And cancel culture. Like, since when do people need to watch more than a headline? Do you remember when Joe Rogan had the clip taken out of context with him saying the N-word? Who cares? Literally, who cares? Like, is the soundbite, is the segment, that's enough to ruin a reputation nowadays. So, literally, I don't care. But in this situation, no, the gentleman literally thinks that his job is harder than manual labor. I wonder, when you have to combine the jobs, like when you do manual labor and intellectual activity and more than 8 hours, like how are those jobs like? Who can do them? Being an ER doctor, like being a doctor, which is giving emergency medicine, like for example, giving CPR. My God, like CPR is one of the most intensive things you can do at a hospital because you have to use your entire body weight in order to massage that person's heart. Like sometimes, and this was taught to me by my professor, that a good CPR at least breaks one rib. Like, can you imagine just how hard you need to do those chest compressions? So it is a intensive work. You gotta get the patient from the bed onto the stretcher, from the stretcher onto the bed. Right? You're constantly running, you're constantly moving. You're working the night shift. Sometimes you work 16 hours a day. No sleep. And you have to also think about things intellectually. Like you look at the diagnosis. I mean, you know, that job probably doesn't compare with being a radio talk show host for 8 hours a day, being a bore, and also being disrespectful to your guests. Like being a complete asshole to people who phone in and do not 100% agree with your worldview. And you know, I myself, as a streamer, do understand that this job has certain difficulties, and it does. You know, like every single job has difficulties. Like if you're flipping burgers at a McDonald's, like you're not going to be awake at night thinking, oh my god, like the recipe that I gave to the patient, I never asked him whether he is allergic to something or not, and that keeps you awake at night, right? So you don't have the stress when you flick burgers at a McDonald's, but you may have like the angry customer. You do deal with the angry manager. Like that does happen, right? So it has its own stress. You can burn yourself with oil. You can't do any of these things if you're a streamer. But as a streamer, you know, you can have a tragedy in the family, like someone can pass away, and you still have to entertain people. You still have to go to work and put on a beautiful face, because at the end of the day, that's your job, right? Like you need to now provide more for your family. Like that can happen, I understand. You're afraid that you may get canceled. You can say something, completely ruining your reputation. You can just, today you're working, tomorrow you're banned from the platform, just like that. It can happen. I understand that these stressful things, but I would never compare myself with someone that does manual labor and be like, oh yes, well, I did do manual labor 2 weeks. I mean, when you look at people who do manual labor, one of the most dangerous things is that they die early, usually from heart attacks. Right? Because you expose yourself in the sun, you constantly lift weights, you constantly do these things. And the fact is like, oh, manual labor, that's more than 8 hours a day. I don't know, at least in my country, like maybe you have stronger workers' rights, wherever you are, dear listener. But here, most people, they work 10, 11, 12 hours a day with no extra pay. Because that's like how manual labor is. It's a competitive market. A lot of people are willing to work for 12 hours a day, so the employer is going to take advantage of that. But my point is, it shows the disrespect, the disdain that the intelligentsia has towards the working class. Like, if they think that what they do is a lot more difficult than manual labor, then of course they're not going to respect the manual labor. The mentality in the West right now is that you need to go to a university to avoid doing the manual labor. At least that's how I was raised, and I know a lot of other people were raised like this. So it does explain why they look down to the working class. They view the working class as uneducated, but even more so, they view that the working class is doing something a lot easier than what they're doing. It's like, well, you know, this guy is flapping his mouth in front of a microphone for 8 hours, and he has a team to help him. And that's a lot more difficult than being a construction worker. How will he respect the construction worker? I will tell him that, though. You can have a society without radio talk show hosts. You can have a society without people like me. But you're not going to have a society without construction workers. You're not going to have a society without plumbers. You're not going to have a society without people that are doing farm work. I don't know about any societies without those people. They're the essential ones. Which, oddly enough, when the pandemic came, it was the radio talk show hosts that were considered to be essential, I guess so that they can fearmonger more, while the people that were actually doing the manual labor, most of them were unessential. Fascinating, isn't it? That's the priorities. It is what it is. Very disappointed, what can I say? And the hubris it shows. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.